HOA Karen is turning my farm into a housing development. Before we tell you a new story, share and like this video. This is very important to us. Thank you. For my family, this piece of land has always been something special. I spent a lot of time on it in my childhood. This plot belonged to my grandfather, a man who believed in honest work and always said that land is the main wealth that can be passed on to future generations. He planted trees, took care of them, told me how important it is to preserve nature. Even when I grew up and left for the city, memories of this place remained with me. The plot was empty for a long time. After the death of my grandfather, endless legal proceedings began. When it was finally over and I received the official certificate of ownership, I felt a huge sense of relief. It was not just property, it was a memory of the family. With these thoughts, I went to the site. On the way, I looked forward to getting out of the car, breathing in fresh air, looking at familiar landscapes, and finally feeling at home. But when I got to the place, my enthusiasm was replaced by absolute shock. Instead of empty land that should have belonged to me, there were already foundations of new houses rising. Construction equipment was roaring, workers were bustling about, and in all this chaos, Karen was standing, giving instructions, and headed straight for her. What the hell is going on here? My voice was louder than the roar of the engines, but even so, I could feel the rage boiling inside me.
Oh, you finally showed up.
Folding her arms across her chest.
It's too late, dear. Construction is already in full swing.
I stood there in a stupor, unable to comprehend the scale of her impudence. Too late? This is my land. Karen sighed dramatically, shaking her head as if I were a stubborn child who didn't want to understand the obvious.
It was yours. While you were sorting out your paperwork, we decided that the empty land should be put to good use.
We? Who are we?
The HOA, of course.
Karen smirked.
The neighborhood needs new homes, and your lot was perfect for expansion.
I took a step forward, towering over her. Do you realize this is illegal? She waved it off as if I had just said something stupid.
This is infrastructure development, dear. We are acting in the best interests of the community.
Without the owner's permission? That's stealing, Karen. She laughed again, this time openly mocking me.
You can complain, you can stamp your feet, but the fact remains that construction is in full swing, and contracts have already been signed with future owners. Do you think the court will side with you?
I ran a hand over my face, trying to keep my anger at bay. You sold lots on my land?
Of course.
Her smile grew even wider.
You weren't going to do anything with it anyway.
I turned sharply to the workers. Stop construction, immediately! But Karen, without missing a beat, clapped her hands.
Keep working. He's just a disgruntled neighbor. He can't do anything.
I'm not a neighbor, I growled. I own this land. You left me no choice, Karen. I'll see you in court. She laughed loudly, throwing her head back. Court! Oh my God! Another one? Her eyes sparkled with pleasure. I've had 20 years of experience in HOA. You think this is the first time someone's tried to sue me? I smirked. You're right, it's not the first time, but it will be the last. She was about to say something, but at that moment, we heard the sound of a police siren. Great, let's see what the cops say. The police got out of the car, carefully examining the construction site. One of them walked toward me.
Is this your land?
Yes.
Do you have the papers?
I silently pulled out the papers and handed them to him. The officer flipped through the pages, nodded, and then slowly turned to Karen.
Ma'am, did you know that this land does not belong to you?
Karen's head snapped up.
I represent the interests of the HOA, and the HOA always acts in the interests of the residents.
That doesn't answer the question. Did you know that the plot of land does not belong to you?
Well, technically...
Not technically, but in fact, you need to file an official lawsuit. Only a court can force them to stop the construction.
I nodded. That same day, I met with a lawyer and filed a lawsuit. I felt a mixture of anger and determination burning inside me. Karen had crossed every possible line, and now it was time to fight back. My lawyer, an experienced and sharp-witted man in his 40s, assured me that we had a strong case.
They have no legal ground to stand on,
He said firmly.
but we need to be thorough. Karen and the HOA will try to twist the facts, make it seem like they were acting for the greater good.
His words only strengthened my resolve. We started gathering every possible document, leaving no stone unturned. Land ownership papers, correspondence records, and even statements from the few workers who hesitated when I ordered them to stop. For a month we collected evidence against Karen, and now we are in court. My lawyer and I were sitting in the courtroom. I was confident in my rights. Karen, confident in her impunity, sat opposite me, casting condescending glances at me.
Your Honor,
Said my lawyer, standing up.
the plaintiff is the legal owner of the site. Neither the HOA nor Mrs. Karen personally had the right to dispose of this land.
The judge turned to Karen.
Defendant, how do you explain the illegal construction?
The site was empty. We decided that it would be more useful if new houses appeared on it. This is in the interests of the area.
My lawyer smiled coldly.
You are disposing of private property that does not belong to you. Moreover, you entered into contracts and received advance payments for houses that you had no right to build.
The judge frowned.
Is that true, defendant? Did you receive the money?
Karen hesitated, but then pressed her lips together.
Well, to some extent.
To the fullest extent,
My lawyer laid the documents on the table.
here are the confirmations of the transfers.
Karen's face fell.
These are just contributions.
The judge raised his hand, interrupting her.
The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. All construction work must be stopped immediately. The defendant is obliged to compensate for the damage caused and demolish the illegally erected structures at her own expense.
Karen jumped to her feet,
This is unfair. I just wanted to make the area better.
but the judge was no longer listening. After winning the case, a new stage began: restoration work. Although the court ordered Karen to demolish the illegal buildings at her own expense, she, of course, dragged out the process, hoping to find a loophole to avoid full responsibility. When the last truck finally took away the remains of the illegal construction, I stood at the edge of the site and looked at the cleared land. My site was back to me, the way it should have been from the very beginning.